All right.
Are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording, and I'll edit out, pieces of the beginning or whatever here. So,
Yeah.
all right, Dad, want to introduce yourself?
Tom Zatkovich, middle name Frank, 77 years old, June 16th. What's that?
Look at me.
Okay, all right, look at you. All right. Married 57 years to Diane Sealand. Served in the military from 67 to 70.
Where do you live?
Live in Chelsea, Michigan on Riker Road. 13789 Riker Road. Place where we built our house. My dad bought that land in 1958.
Oh, hang on.
Okay,
So when were you born?
where?
When? What's your birthday?
June 16. I said
What year?
that. 47.
Where were you born now?
Underneath the Ambassador Bridge.
Now explain that story.
Okay, back in Detroit, when my parents lived, had a lot of these smaller neighborhood hospitals. And there was a hospital named William Booth Hospital, and it was almost underneath the Ambassador Bridge. And my parents had a place in Canada, Campers Cove, where they had their trailer. And whenever we would go over the bridge, my mother would point down and say, "That's where you were born." You could just see it off the edge of the bridge there. So, I was born when we lived in a house on Granville. I was in West Detroit. We went to St. Peter and Paul Church. Went to kindergarten there. The house that we lived in was a large, two-story. Would you say it was like a Tudor house? And Grandma Himmick lived upstairs, and it had a coal furnace, and Susie and I each had our own bedroom. My parents had theirs. Had a nice living room. Had an extra lot with a lot of fruit trees.
Hey, Joe, cut out. Would you?
And it had a Bartlett pear tree. It had a Stanley pear tree. He had an apple tree, but I forget what kind it was. And he had a sour cherry tree. And that was really a big tree in our family because all the aunts would come over our house and pick cherries for their pies and canning and it had a lot of it was easy to climb, and I used to climb it.
Who from your family first moved into that house?
My mom and dad bought that house, and they brought Grandma Himmick with them. And Grandma Himmick had an apartment upstairs. You walked in the front door. There was a vestibule with a door to steps upstairs and a door to the living room where the first floor was. And it had a coal furnace. And my dad used to have to stoke it in the morning and bank it at night. Now, I don't know what those terms actually are, but that's what I remember him doing. It had a big vent in the hallway, like between the kitchen and the dining room, with a big vent, probably 3 feet by a foot and a half, real ornate brass vent. And every morning, of course, the house would be cold. Susie and I would get dressed on top of that vent. And it was a lot of fun. There were a lot of nice neighbors. I can't remember their name, people across the street. There was a girl next door that I played with. Her last name was Pace. And Jimmy Mitchell, that was the guy that was across the street. And he was a big car guy. He repaired cars. He was a mechanic and repaired cars, but he also did it in his garage for people.
How long did you live on Granville?
How long? Till I was 5. I went through kindergarten at St. Peter and Paul, which is right down the street from where we lived. And my parents moved over to Grayfield when I was 5.
That's in Dearborn Heights, right?
That's in Dearborn Heights. About 3 blocks off of Rouge Park, which is in Detroit. And as I was growing up, we spent countless hours in Rouge Park playing sandlot baseball. One time we were over there playing baseball, and a kid from across the street, there was a nice house, and in the middle of the block was a beautiful 2-story house, Tudor house, and he walked across and he starts hitting golf balls, and he was probably a junior or senior in high school, and we were mesmerized by that. I guess we may probably have been 9, 10, 11 years old, and my dad scrounged up from his buddies at work clubs, and we would go over there and we made our own golf course. You hit off this mound and hit that tree, tee off from that tree, hit that other tree, go over to the sand hole over there. I mean, we had a ball with it. And
Who were some of the kids you played with?
well, there was Mark Hurley. He was a year younger than me. Jerry Sulak. He lived on a corner. Bob Jessing. He was the athlete. Big, very coordinated. Played football for Fortson High School. And it was funny. We'd go over there. The McFadden's. There was Doug, who was a year older, and there was a Tommy that was my age. And Tommy and Doug were both born in the 50s with a hole in their heart. And Tommy McFadden had the first open heart surgery in the state of Michigan. Didn't survive. A year later, Doug had it. It was the first successful open heart surgery in the state of Michigan. And we'd all play Rouge Park. We also played in the street, Grayfield. Played baseball, played football, hockey. We'd have,
What were some of the rules of playing in the street?
well, the road was a cement road, and about every, I'm going to say 20 feet, maybe 25 feet, there was a split down the middle, and there was a thing put through, where you put cement together and it doesn't crack and stuff like that, expansion joints. And about every 4th one, there was a real fat one put in. We used to call it the fat line. And we played football, and it was one fat line to the next fat line. And we'd play, and you couldn't run hardly, because it was a very narrow road. So everything was passing. And boy, we used to have a ball doing that.
What
And
if a car came?
we just got off the road and it went by. And after a while, we played this game. Half the guys would go over one side, and every time a car went over, you threw the football over the car, and the other guy had to catch it. If he didn't catch it, everybody, that was not a good catch, you know. But sometimes there'd be doubles. Sometimes there'd be triple cars, and we'd throw them back and forth like that, you know. Cheer and jump up and down because we had a triple. And there were a couple of younger kids, the Carson boys, and they didn't like playing with us because they were on the sissy side. And, you know, we played two-hand touch, and if you touch them too hard, they get all upset and go home and cry, you know. And, but after a while, they manned up. And
Did you say that there was a tree at Rouge Park that you used to climb or play on?
there was this big maple tree. Van Buren went around, crossed West Parkway, and made a big turn, and it turned into West Parkway. No, was it West Parkway? Anyways, it turned, and it was the edge of Rouge Park all the way down to Warren Avenue. And on the right there at that curve was this big maple tree. And it was a beautiful climbing tree. And we called it the octopus tree. Now, why we called it that, I don't know. We called it the octopus tree. And we'd go over there and climb, and you could sit up at the very top of that. It had branches, you know, fairly large banks that went out, and you could sit there, and you could actually see Tiger Stadium, downtown Detroit, on a good day. You could see the lights of Tiger Stadium, you know, that sort of stuff. Ambassador Bridge every once in a while. And we'd been up there, and the park guys used to come and yell at us all the time. And they would cut the bottom branches off to prevent us from climbing the tree. And we'd get 2 or 3 guys and boost one up and reach down and hold them up. And that was a great time. My initials are in that tree somewhere.
Think it's still around?
No, grown over. That was 60 years ago, Dan. Dang. I don't even know if the tree's still there.
What was your dad doing at this time?
My dad worked at Ford Motor Company. And all I remember is my dad working at the steel division as a machine repairman. I heard stories of him. He started to work in the foundry in, I think, 36 or 38. And in 1940, the UAW was trying to organize Ford Motor Company. They had a sit-down strike. And every plant in Rouge, which was about 100,000 guys employed at the time, just parked themselves in the plant, and nothing could be done. And I remember my mom telling stories of her giving drinks and food through the windows. My parents, my dad or people would lean out, and their wives and family would give them food. And if it wasn't for Clara Ford, Henry Ford's wife, finally said, enough is enough. You will solve that problem and agree to a union, which he did. I have a pamphlet of the first contract. It's a little tiny pamphlet. It's got about 50 pages in it, big type. You look at their contract now, it's about that thick, 8.5 by 11. Little tiny words, you know, little tiny letters, rather. My dad was very proud of that. He was a very staunch UAW guy.
You used to tell stories about the meeting in your
My
basement.
dad in the basement had a big,
At Granville or at
no, Grayfield,
Grayfield?
had a great big oak table and chairs, and when you pulled it out, they could put 10 chairs around it. And you would hear all kind of yelling, and I'm sure there were fisticuffs down there. I don't know, it had to be, you know. But when they were done and they walked down the driveway, it was hand in hand. You know, there was solidarity there, totally. And my dad was part of the union leadership at that time, and at the Rouge, and he negotiated the first canteen in the Rouge area, and it was a truck would pull these 2 or 3 trailers with food in it, and they would go around. But up until that time, they didn't have nothing. I remember my dad saying that, you know, you went into the bathroom, there was no doors, no dividers, just nothing. Foreman walked in there, and you'd better had a turd in the thing, or you were. And they had these places what he called the hooks. When you got into the plant, you put your coat and your lunchbox on these hooks, and when the shift started, these hooks went up in the ceiling, so you couldn't get to them. Lunchtime would come down, they would come down, you could go get them, and then they would go back up again. My grandma Himmick told the story of my dad borrowing $50 from her one time to buy his job back from the supervisor. The supervisor said to him, "You want to come to work on Monday? It'll cost you $50. You know, those are the things that happened back then. You know, my dad was with Walter Reuther, was the original of the UAW. My dad knew him. He was a saint as far as my dad was concerned. And when Walter Reuther got killed in that plane crash, my dad it was a solemn sorrow in my house for a long time. And
You had other family members working for it too, didn't you?
Uncle Joe Zatkovich, he was a switcher on the railroad at the Rouge. The Rouge had a lot of railroads in it. They had the BOF, they had the steel division, all the different flight frame plant, glass plant, oxygen plant, and everything. There was more railroad tracks. At one time, there was more railroad tracks in the Rouge than there were in the city of Detroit. Of course, there'd be 5 tracks right next to each other, you know, but, and my Uncle Joe was a switcher on that radio, on that thing. And I can remember when I was first started working at Ford, 1973, 74, I'd come down for lunch. I'd go out for lunch out of my office there, walking towards the lunchroom, and there would be my Uncle Joe with a big shitty grin on his face, come to have lunch with me. And he probably was switching outside the plant where we were at. And BOS would take these molten metal, and it was basically unpurified iron. It wasn't steel yet. And they had these big railroad cars that looked like footballs on them, but real long, elongated. Big old hole in the top with a thing top that went. And the BOFs would put their molten iron in there. And they'd send it over to the BOF, what is it? Basic oxygen furnace. And that's where they took that and made steel out of it. And that would, when it was done making steel, big, huge things of flames coming out. They used to shoot pure oxygen in there, in this thing. And it was big, maybe 60 foot around, 60 foot high kettle of iron. And then it would tip into what they called ingot molds. And ingot molds were big, huge molds. They pour the iron in. And it would come out in slabs maybe 2 foot by 1 foot by 10 foot high. Steel. And these things were on rail cars, so BOF would put all these things in it. There might be 10 or 15 of them in a row, with 2 ingot molds on every cart. And I can remember that managers in the plant used to be able to park along the front of the plant, and every once in a while they would park a train of hot ingot molds, and everybody's front of everybody's car, that plastic would just they'd get so angry. Anyways,
Where did you go to school when you lived on Greenfield?
Our Lady of Grace.
Where was that?
3 blocks over towards Telegraph. You know, we lived off of Joy Road, and the main street, next street was Telegraph. We lived 3 blocks off the Rouge Park in Detroit, and 2 more blocks was Our Lady of Grace, and 3 more blocks was Telegraph Road. And so what did I do? Walk to school, and I would walk home for lunch, and I'd scarf my lunch down, you know, and run back to schools, because we had playground time, you know, lunchtime, and the guys played all kind of games. They played baseball or football, keep away. They had girls had jump rope and hopscotch, and there was swings and merry-go-rounds and slides on the side of the school. So that was a nice time for us. And then,
Who were some of your friends at the school? Do you remember anybody else? Or teachers? Do you remember any of your teachers?
I'd have to go back and think about that. Mrs. Nowicki. We had both sisters and lay teachers, mostly sisters. And I can't remember. My mother, I can remember when I was in kindergarten and first grade. I wasn't in kindergarten, first grade and second grade. My mother became the secretary at the principal's office. And every once in a while you'd have to go down to see the principal, and guess what? My mother was there. That was horrible. I graduated from there, 8th grade. Went to Visitation High School.
Where was that at?
12th Street and Webb in Detroit. We looked at the map one time.
Yeah, southwest corner, right?
Mm-hmm. And,
It's gone now.
oh yeah. It was a big church and a school next to it, 3 stories. It was kind of a unique Catholic church because it had 1/3 white students, 1/3 black students, and 1/3 Chaldean students. And those were Iraqi Christians. And so it was quite a mix of kids. We all had to wear uniforms. The girls had these ugly below the knee kind of things, you know, and boys have to wear black pants, white shirt and a tie.
So Visitation was co-ed.
Oh yes. And also it was, had a grade school there too. So I would say, let's see, there was 96 or 94 people in my graduating class.
Now, when did you start dating Mom? Let's back up. Where did you meet Mom?
There's a debate on whether I was 15 or 16 years old when we met. And we met at Our Lady of Grace. It was a sock hop dance. And they had a big lunchroom down in the bottom. And of course they had a record player and were playing music. And kids were dancing, and I met Mom there. And I asked her to walk her home, and she said, okay. So I walked her home. Of course, it was one block over, one block up, you know, and that's how it started. And we dated my junior year when I could drive. We would date a lot. I would get up in the morning, go to school and drive. I'd pick her up, and I'd take her, drop her off at Rosary, and then go on to visitation. And we had a couple times where we were apart. She dated other guys. She had a hard time with her dad about dating. And for some reason, it was okay to date me. And but he did not. I'd pick up Mom on Sunday, 9, 10. Oh, we're going to church. Never make it. And there was.
Can I explore that? What do you mean never make it?
Well, we'd lie, you know. Go to Connor's and have a coffee or a Coke and a piece of pie or something. Go up to Big Boys.
Where was the Big Boys at?
I was on Telegraph Road, about 2 miles down from Joy Road.
North?
Maybe not even that, maybe a mile down.
South? North?
North.
North.
On the east side of the road.
Big Boys, it maintains the Zatkovich tradition.
Oh
Do you
yes,
and
till
Mom
this
still-
day.
Do you and Mom still find one to go to nowadays?
Tecumseh.
Tecumseh, of all places.
They have a Tecumseh Big Boys. You can get alcohol there. They have the same old salad bar. They got a salad bar actually, and they have the salad bar. And every once in a while, we'll drive down there.
Now, just for posterity, for the camera, we used to go to the Big Boys in Chelsea, right?
Right.
You and Mom would order. You may switch it up. Mom ordered generally the same thing, which was
3 things Mom ordered: the fish, the Slim Jim, and I forget the other one. Fish and Slim Jim were her Slim Jim was a major one, and that's that ham sandwich with fries. And when we go down to Tecumseh, guess what we order? Yeah. It's a popular place. Every time I go in there, of course I've only been there twice, but it's crowded.
what were some other places around where you grew up that you and Mom would go?
Blazos, which was on a corner of Michigan Avenue, 1 block east of Telegraph. And it was like a Big Boy. As a matter of fact, they had a sandwich very similar to the Slim Jim called a Hammy Sammy. We used to get that. Split a fry. I'd get a Coke, she'd get a Verner's. And it also had a place on the back where you would drive into these stalls, and you had a little thing radio out here. You would make your order, had the menu up there, and you make your order, and some girl would, or somebody would come out and bring your food to you.
What kind of car were you driving?
I was driving that 62 Ford Fairlane, V8 automatic, 4-door, you know. And there was another Blazos down Michigan Avenue all the way into Detroit by Miller Road in Michigan Avenue. So sometimes we'd run that, come back with that one, run down to the Big Boys on Telegraph. And all these places you could drive in and order. You'd order some small. My friends in high school were, of course, John Yee, Julio and Julio Peraza, and I met them when I was at Henry Ford Community College. John Wasinski, which happened to be a cousin of your mother's. As a matter of fact, his grandparents lived across the street from Mom's grandma and grandpa on Hammond Street in Detroit. And we were in a lot of classes together. And there was another guy that kind of hung out with us, lived kitty corner from John Yee in Detroit. He was an Irish kid, red hair, and I was like 18, 19 years old. He got caught doing something, went to jail. I don't remember what. And you could tell that he was kind of on the shady side when we were hanging out. And Julio had a brother named Carlos and had a sister. And Julio was the oldest, Carlos, and then her. And they were from Puerto Rico. And God, she was gorgeous. She was a really good looking woman. And smart too. Applied herself, got good grades, went off to college, and after that I don't know what happened to her. You know, so. And I had a friend named Jack Richmond that lived in the neighborhood. And I was going with Diane, and he was dating a girl named Barbara Pearl, which was in the neighborhood also. And they were really tight for a long time. And I think they got married, but soon got divorced. And I don't know whether it happened to him. Worked for the Ford Motor Company in the assembly plant, doing what, I don't know. So,
Let's call it right there, Dad.
okay.
That's a good start.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.